My mom doesn't want you here.
The grand chandelier threw sparkling reflections across the marble floors, and the villa buzzed with laughter, champagne glasses clinking, and the soft murmur of carefully chosen guests. I stepped inside, expecting a warm welcome, maybe even a nod of acceptance from my wife's mother, Margaret. But the moment Sophia leaned close, her eyes wide and trembling, she whispered, "My mom doesn't want you here." The words hit me like a punch, sharp and undeniable. All around me, the celebration continued. Oblivious to the storm brewing in a corner of the room, I could feel the cold weight of disapproval from Margaret's gaze, slicing through the air, and a suffocating sense of injustice gripped me. Why was I being rejected in a place that should have celebrated love? The mystery hovered, thick and menacing, promising secrets, betrayal, and truths yet untold. Tonight was going to unravel everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and trust. Before we dive into this intense story, comment below your location and local time, and make sure to subscribe so you won't miss a single twist in this emotional journey. The tension was palpable the moment I stepped deeper into the grand hall. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the ceiling like frozen stars, reflecting fragmented light across the polished marble floors. Guests in elegant dresses and tailored suits mingled, laughing politely, their voices layering over the soft notes of a string quartet. But for me, every sound felt muffled, every laugh hollow, as though I existed in a separate, colder dimension. Sophia stayed close, her hand brushing mine briefly, a small tether of comfort in the growing storm. Yet, even her warmth could not shield me from Margaret's eyes, sharp, calculating, and unapologetically hostile. I forced a smile, nodding to acquaintances I barely knew. My mind raced, replaying Sophia's whispered warning. "She doesn't want you here," the words echoed, growing louder with each heartbeat. I had known Margaret was difficult, protective, perhaps even overly controlling, but I had never imagined this. Being rejected before even a word could be exchanged. It was a humiliation painted in the most exquisite surroundings. The villa, for all its opulence, suddenly felt like a gilded cage. Every ornate vase, every meticulously arranged flower, mocked me silently, reminding me that beauty did not equate to kindness. Sophia squeezed my hand, silently pleading, her eyes darting toward her mother. I could see her anxiety, the tremor in her lips, the small sigh that escaped her chest as Margaret approached. The older woman's presence was magnetic, commanding attention without a word. Guests instinctively straightened, some bowing subtly, others offering polite smiles that barely concealed curiosity. And yet, for me, there was nothing but disdain. Margaret's lips curled into a thin line, her gaze lingering, assessing, weighing, condemning. It was the kind of scrutiny that made one question every choice, every action, every intention. I tried to meet her eyes, to offer a polite nod, an olive branch, but she turned, gliding past me with an elegance that made her cruelty all the more piercing. Sophia's grip tightened, her nails pressing lightly into my hand. A silent apology, a shared frustration that we could not voice. I followed, keeping pace, weaving between guests, each smile and greeting from others, a reminder of my outsider status. I overheard snippets of conversation comments about the villa, the renovation, the exquisite taste of the hosts, but no mention of me. Not even a fleeting acknowledgement that I existed. The exclusion was deliberate, orchestrated, and cruel. I paused near a grand staircase, trying to collect myself. Memories of my first encounter with Sophia flashed through my mind, the laughter, the quiet moments, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her dreams. Back then, I had thought love could bridge any gap, but tonight, reality confronted me with a brutal clarity. Some walls were built with more than stone. They were fortified with pride, judgment, and past grievances. I realized I was not merely visiting a home. I was stepping into a battlefield where the rules were unknown and the enemy invisible. Margaret's whispers reached my ears, though the words were meant for someone else. sharp and pointed. "Do you think he belongs here?" I clenched my jaw, swallowing a retort that would have done little to change the outcome. Sophia's face paled, and I sensed her inner conflict. Loyalty to her mother, yet love for me. The tension between them, the silent tug of war, was nearly unbearable. I wanted to speak, to assert my place, but the moment demanded patience, and patience was not my strength. I breathed deeply, forcing my pulse to steady, even as my stomach churned with anger and humiliation. As the evening progressed, Margaret continued her subtle campaign. A friend would approach, introducing herself with warmth, and Margaret's eyes would flicker toward me. A silent warning. This person does not belong in your world. A server passed by with a tray of champagne, and Margaret's gaze followed the glass as if it were a measuring stick, judging my worthiness to even touch it. Every gesture, every glance, carried layers of meaning. I felt like an actor in a play where I had not learned the lines, trapped in a script written long before I arrived. I sought solace in the garden, stepping outside to inhale the crisp night air. The villa's exterior was equally magnificent, the gardens, illuminated by soft lanterns, fountains glimmering under the moonlight. But even in this serene beauty, I could not escape the shadow of rejection. Sophia joined me, silent at first, her presence comforting yet tinged with guilt. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted tonight to feel like this." I nodded, acknowledging her pain, understanding that she was caught between love and duty. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I felt a surge of protectiveness, wanting to shield her from her mother's judgment, even if I could not protect myself. Inside, Margaret had convened a small circle of her closest acquaintances. I caught fragments of their conversation, loaded with implications and unspoken rules. They discussed my background, my career, my intentions, all in tones that suggested suspicion rather than interest. I realized that acceptance would not come from charm or conversation. Tonight, it would require something more profound, a demonstration of character that could not be ignored. The challenge loomed, silent yet omnipresent, a gauntlet thrown at my feet before I had even uttered a single word. By the time dinner was announced, the atmosphere had thickened to an almost tangible density. Every step I took toward the dining hall felt like walking through a storm, each glance from Margaret cutting sharper than the last. Sophia's hand on my arm reminded me that I was not alone, that her faith in me remained steadfast despite the tension. Still, the weight of judgment was suffocating. I realized that this evening was not just about a grand opening. It was about proving myself to a woman who had already decided I did not deserve a place in her world. The villa, for all its grandeur, had become a crucible, and I was at its center, forged by scrutiny, secrecy, and silent opposition. As I took my seat beside Sophia, the room seemed to hold its breath. Margaret's eyes settled on me, unblinking, calculating, and I knew this night would shape our future in ways I could not yet comprehend. The story of love, betrayal, and redemption was only beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. I felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment, and understood that this was more than a family gathering. It was a test of character, a battlefield of hearts, and the opening act of a story that promised twists, revelations, and truths that would challenge everything I thought I knew. The memory of how Sophia and I first met came unbidden, a sharp contrast to the cold tension surrounding us now. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that soaked through clothes and clung to the skin. Yet our laughter had filled the tiny cafe like sunlight piercing a storm. Her hair, dark and glossy, had clung to her cheeks, and her eyes had sparkled with a mischievous light, full of warmth and unguarded curiosity. I remembered how effortlessly we had connected, the way conversations flowed as if we had known each other for lifetimes. Back then, the world had seemed simpler, full of promise, and yet I had always sensed the shadow of her family's influence lurking at the edges. Margaret's presence had been an unspoken force, even in those early days, subtle yet firm. Sophia had often spoken of her mother with a mixture of admiration and caution, hinting at the ironclad rules that governed her household. I had brushed it off at first, believing that love could bridge any gap, that sincerity and patience could overcome even the most rigid barriers. But tonight, those old fears had manifested in the most brutal way. Margaret's rejection was not just a personal slight, it was a culmination of years of doubt, of judgments, and comparisons I had never been allowed to confront openly. As I stood near the entrance, observing the gathering, I could almost see the invisible lines that divided the room. Guests moved freely, their interactions light and carefree, yet there was a cordon around me, a subtle but undeniable barrier that Margaret had orchestrated. Every polite nod, every fleeting smile from someone else, felt like an accusation. "You do not belong here?" My chest tightened with the injustice of it. I had come with respect, with love, carrying nothing but goodwill, and yet I was treated as an intruder. Sophia leaned closer, her lips brushing my ear as she whispered fragments of her own anxiety. She wanted to bridge the gap, to smooth over her mother's disdain. But even she was trapped in the labyrinth of familial expectation. The villa itself seemed to conspire against us, every ornate painting and sculpted archway, a reminder of wealth, tradition, and control elements I could not easily penetrate. The grandeur, which should have been welcoming, instead, highlighted my alienation. I was acutely aware of my outsider status, every movement scrutinized, every gesture measured. I tried to remind myself of the small victories in our relationship, the laughter, the shared dreams, the quiet moments of understanding between Sophia and me. But tonight, those memories felt fragile, like candlelight struggling against a gust of wind. Margaret's presence was oppressive, her judgment palpable in the way the room seemed to bend toward her will. I overheard a snippet of conversation between two guests, a casual remark about wealth and lineage, and felt the sting of exclusion. The comments were subtle, coded, yet unmistakable. "You are not of the world we inhabit, not fully welcome, not truly recognized." As the evening wore on, I noticed Sophia's own unease growing. She shifted her weight, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her clutch, eyes darting toward her mother with silent pleas. I understood the internal conflict she faced. Love for me intertwined with loyalty and fear of maternal disappointment. Her hesitation, her restraint, added another layer of complexity to the already tense atmosphere. Every glance we exchanged was laden with unspoken questions and desperate reassurances, each trying to navigate the chasm between expectation and desire. Margaret, for her part, continued her careful surveillance. She smiled, but it was a smile that revealed nothing but her own satisfaction in maintaining control. Every conversation around her seemed to pivot, however subtly, toward the topic of who belonged, who was worthy, and who might threaten the delicate equilibrium she had established. I realized that tonight's gathering was not merely ceremonial, it was a proving ground. Every word, every action, every nuance of behavior would be observed, interpreted, and judged according to standards. I had no opportunity to negotiate. In a brief moment of solitude, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. My love for Sophia had been unwavering, but it had never been tested in such a direct and public manner. The stakes were high, and the rules unspoken. I understood that any misstep, any moment of hesitation, could be amplified and weaponized in the intricate dance of social hierarchy Margaret had constructed. The villa, beautiful and imposing, was now a stage, and we were all actors bound by roles neither fully chosen nor understood. Sophia touched my arm, grounding me in the present. Her eyes met mine, full of apology and hope, and I felt a fleeting sense of unity amid the alienation. The night was far from over, and I knew the challenges would only escalate. Margaret's gaze lingered on us, sharp and unyielding, a silent reminder of the obstacles ahead. Yet beneath the tension, beneath the judgment and whispered criticisms, there remained a thread of possibility. If we could navigate this labyrinth, if we could withstand the scrutiny and remain true to ourselves, perhaps The night could end differently than it had begun. The memory of our shared past, combined with the reality of the present, created a pressure that was almost unbearable. And yet, within that pressure, there was clarity. We had to confront the obstacles head on, to endure and assert our place, not through argument but through resilience, patience, and unwavering presence. The grand opening of the villa was not merely a celebration, it was a crucible. And how we emerged from it would define the course of our lives together. The first true shock came like a sudden thunderclap, slicing through the careful veneer of civility that had dominated the evening until now. As I navigated through the throng of guests, a familiar yet chilling voice cut across the ambient music and laughter. Margaret's words, low but deliberate, carried an unmistakable edge. "Do you really think he belongs here?" Heads turned subtly. A few raised eyebrows flicked in my direction, while others pretended not to notice. The intention was clear: to humiliate, to assert control, to make my presence a subject of scrutiny rather than celebration. Sophia's hand found mine in a tight squeeze, her eyes wide with fear and embarrassment. The flush of red across her cheeks betrayed her inner turmoil, caught between defending the man she loved and respecting the formidable authority of her mother. I could see the conflict etched into her expression, the hesitation of someone who loved but feared the consequences of defiance. Margaret's gaze lingered on me like a blade, cold, unwavering, assessing every reaction, every twitch of my fingers, every hint of doubt in my posture. I realized, in that moment, that this was not merely a personal affront, it was a spectacle designed to expose my vulnerabilities in front of everyone. Trying to maintain composure, I forced a polite smile, nodding in acknowledgement to a guest who offered a friendly greeting. The act of courtesy felt heavy, almost absurd, in the face of the silent war being waged against me. Margaret's presence seemed to absorb the warmth from the room, creating a zone of tension that was impossible to ignore. Every laugh, every toast, every cheer around me felt distant, as though I were trapped behind a translucent wall that separated me from the rest of the world. And yet, despite the humiliation, a strange clarity emerged. This was a test, and I would need every ounce of patience and poise to navigate it. As I moved through the room, I noticed subtle alliances forming around Margaret. Friends and family members whispered behind cupped hands, their glances sharp, assessing, reinforcing her position. I could feel their judgment like tiny needles against my skin, each one pricking at my confidence. Every detail of my appearance, my speech, my demeanor seemed to be weighed and measured against some invisible standard. I was acutely aware that any misstep, however minor, would be amplified, remembered, and used as evidence against my worthiness. The weight of expectation was suffocating, yet the challenge awakened a resolve deep within me. I would not retreat, I would not break, and I would not allow the evening to define my self-worth. Sophia tried to intervene subtly, steering conversation away from uncomfortable territories, smiling gently at her mother in a bid to diffuse tension. But Margaret was relentless, her authority absolute, her judgments sharp and unyielding. The elegance of her movements, the effortless command she held over the room, made her cruelty all the more striking. I watched as she subtly excluded me from discussions, redirecting attention, controlling the narrative of the evening with a precision that was both mesmerizing and infuriating. I felt small, an outsider, yet a fire ignited within me. If acceptance could not be earned through pleasantries, it would have to be claimed through strength, dignity, and patience. In a moment of fleeting respite, I glanced around at the other guests. Their polite smiles and laughter felt hollow, detached from the tension that dominated my world. Some were oblivious, caught up in their own enjoyment, while others were acutely aware of the drama unfolding. I overheard bits of conversation, remarks about the villa's grandeur, the success of the renovation, subtle comments about the choices Sophia had made, but all of it carried the undercurrent of judgment aimed at me. It was a silent chorus of skepticism, a reminder that I was being evaluated not for who I was, but for who I appeared to be in the eyes of Margaret and her inner circle. Sophia's presence at my side was a lifeline, Her quiet reassurances, the occasional brush of her fingers against mine, reminded me that we were in this together, navigating a labyrinth of expectations and unspoken rules. Yet, I could see the strain on her face, the toll that her mother's judgment was taking on her. She loved me, that much was clear, but her loyalty was divided, tethered to a bond she could not easily sever. The complexity of her position made the tension almost unbearable. A silent battle fought with glances, gestures, and subtle manipulations that I had to decipher in real time. The first real confrontation arrived unexpectedly. Margaret's sharp voice directed a question at me, casual in tone but loaded with implication. "So, Ethan, what exactly do you bring to this family?" The room seemed to pause, the music fading into the background as all eyes turned toward me. The question was simple, but it carried the weight of an accusation. Prove yourself worthy or be dismissed entirely. I felt a jolt of adrenaline, a rush of anger, and an equal measure of fear. The injustice of it struck deep. How could one prove belonging when the standards were arbitrary, when the judgment was already predetermined? I drew a steadying breath, choosing my words carefully. I spoke with measured confidence, highlighting my commitment to Sophia, my respect for family traditions, and my intentions to support, not disrupt, the bonds that held the household together. Margaret's gaze never wavered, unflinching, as if she were evaluating not just my words but the truth of my character, the integrity behind each syllable. The room hung on the silence that followed, tension crackling like static electricity. Sophia's hand squeezed mine again, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes, a reminder that we were in this together, bound by love and resilience. Despite the humiliation, the subtle isolation, and the piercing judgment, a sense of determination rooted itself deep within me. This was more than a personal slight. It was a crucible that would reveal the strength of my character, the depth of our relationship, and the resilience of love against prejudice and expectation. The night was far from over, and the challenges ahead promised to test every fiber of our patience, courage, and loyalty. Margaret's disdain had been made painfully clear, but the story was only beginning, and I resolved that it would not end with defeat or humiliation. It was during a brief lull in the evening that I began to uncover the first threads of the secret that had fueled Margaret's icy disdain. A server, carrying a tray of sparkling water, had accidentally let slip a snippet of conversation, intended for someone else entirely. "He's the one everyone warned me about," a soft voice murmured, heavy with warning, and I froze mid-step. I had heard whispers before, rumors meant to sow doubt, but now the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. Margaret's judgment was not spontaneous. It had been cultivated over years, fed by fears, biases, and stories of betrayal that I had never been part of, yet whose weight I now carried. I moved quietly to the corner of the room, pretending to admire a painting of the villa's sprawling gardens while piecing together the fragments I had overheard. There was a pattern, subtle but unmistakable. Margaret's network of confidantes, friends, relatives, and perhaps even distant colleagues of Sophia's had been engaged in a quiet campaign to question my worth. The reasons were varied. Whispers about my background, my past relationships, my career choices, even my family. Each morsel of information had been twisted, repackaged, and presented to Margaret in a way that justified her prejudices. The realization hit me with a bitter clarity. This rejection was not just personal, it was meticulously orchestrated. Sophia appeared beside me, her presence soft but insistent. "Ethan," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at her mother, "please don't make this worse." Her eyes were filled with both fear and love, a complex mix that mirrored my own internal conflict. I nodded subtly, acknowledging her plea, while also steeling myself. There was no turning back. I had to understand the forces at play if I wanted to navigate them successfully. As I continued to observe, I caught snippets of further conversations. Margaret's friends spoke in hushed tones about past betrayals, stories of partners who had disappointed, deceived, or abandoned members of the family. These narratives were steeped in cautionary tones, intended to protect rather than harm. But the consequence was clear. I was being measured against a standard that was neither fair nor relevant to who I truly was. The injustice of it burned sharply, yet amidst the anger, I recognized a crucial truth. Knowledge was power. Understanding the source of Margaret's disdain was the first step in dismantling it. I thought back to the early days with Sophia, the moments that had defined our relationship, every laugh we had shared, every challenge we had overcome, seemed trivial compared to the storm that now surrounded us. Yet, those memories were also a source of strength. They reminded me of what I was fighting for, not just acceptance, but the ability to protect the bond that mattered most. Margaret's judgment could not erase the genuine connection between Sophia and me, no matter how formidable her influence seemed. The evening's formalities continued, each toast and congratulatory remark highlighting the divide between me and the rest of the guests. Every compliment to Sophia's family was a reminder of my outsider status. Yet, within this disparity, I found a strategy forming in my mind. I would observe, listen, and identify the truths that were hidden beneath the polished veneers and polite laughter. If acceptance was to be earned, it would not come from confrontation or argument. It would come from understanding the fears and insecurities that had been projected onto me. During a quiet moment near the fireplace, I overheard a remark that was both revealing and troubling. One of Margaret's close friends spoke of a distant cousin, a man who had married into the family and caused heartbreak, financial loss, and long-standing resentment. "We cannot let history repeat itself," she said, her tone heavy with caution. The parallel was unmistakable. I was being measured not by my actions, but by the failures of others. The weight of unfair comparison pressed against me, yet the clarity of the situation offered a strange sense of relief. I knew now why Margaret's rejection felt so absolute. It was built on fear, not fact. Sophia stayed by my side, guiding me through the social maze, while avoiding drawing attention from her mother. Her subtle support was both a lifeline and a reminder of the precariousness of our position. Every word, every gesture, was calculated to maintain equilibrium, to navigate the delicate balance of love, loyalty, and family politics. I realized that this night was more than a test of acceptance. It was a lesson in patience, strategy, and emotional intelligence. The villa, with all its grandeur, was the backdrop for a complex drama, one that would require every ounce of composure I could summon. As the evening progressed, I began to piece together the motives behind Margaret's actions. Her protectiveness was rooted in past trauma, in experiences of betrayal and disappointment that had shaped her worldview. She was not merely capricious, she was cautious, determined to shield her family from perceived threats, however misdirected those perceptions might be. Understanding this allowed me to reframe my perspective. Her hostility was not a reflection of my inadequacy, but a projection of her fears. This realization provided a foundation for resilience, a mental armor against the sting of rejection. By the time dinner was announced, I had formulated a plan. Observation, understanding, and patience would be my allies. I would engage with guests politely, demonstrate respect, and allow my character to speak louder than any rumors or preconceived notions. I would rely on Sophia's support, trust in the strength of our relationship, and maintain my dignity, no matter how hostile the environment. The night was far from over, and the path to acceptance was treacherous, but I felt a newfound determination. Margaret's disdain, while formidable, was not insurmountable. As we entered the dining hall, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the polished table, I took a steadying breath. Each place setting, each glass, each polished fork seemed to underscore the significance of the moment. Tonight, I was not merely a guest, I was a participant in a complex dance of perception, judgment, and familial power. Every interaction would carry weight, every word would be dissected, every gesture interpreted, but I was ready. I understood the stakes, the underlying fears, and the subtle machinations And in that understanding, I found a quiet strength, a resolve to navigate the night with integrity, patience, and unyielding determination. Sophia's inner turmoil was impossible to ignore. As we moved through the villa, navigating clusters of elegantly dressed guests and servers balancing trays of champagne, I could see the conflict etched on her face. Her eyes darted constantly toward her mother, Margaret, and though she tried to maintain a composed exterior, her tension radiated in subtle ways. The tightening of her jaw, the barely perceptible tremble in her hands, the quick, nervous glances. It was as though she were standing on a narrow bridge, caught between loyalty to her mother and her devotion to me. Each step we took seemed to stretch that bridge thinner, the weight of expectation threatening to snap it entirely. We paused near a large window overlooking the villa's gardens, the soft glow of lanterns reflecting off the glass. I turned to Sophia, searching for reassurance, for some sign that we were in this together. She met my gaze, eyes shimmering with both love and fear, and whispered, "I don't know how to make her accept you. She's so hard to reach." Her words carried the heavy weight of vulnerability, exposing the depth of her struggle. I wanted to tell her that I understood, that we would face this together. But I also knew that the situation required more than emotional support. It demanded strategy, patience, and unwavering composure. Margaret's presence was omnipresent, her influence, like a magnetic force, pulling the room toward her will. Every conversation we attempted to engage in was subtly redirected. Every compliment we offered deflected or undermined. She had mastered the art of control, shaping the narrative without ever speaking a direct accusation. Guests laughed politely at her anecdotes, nodded in agreement with her subtle assertions, and yet I could feel the unspoken barrier she erected around me. It was a social labyrinth, and I had been thrown into its center without a map. I observed Sophia as she tried to mediate, her gentle interventions, a delicate dance between deference and advocacy. She smiled, laughed at her mother's jokes, and offered subtle affirmations to me when Margaret's gaze was elsewhere. It was a silent form of resistance, a way of signaling that she believed in me, despite the storm around us. I could see the strain on her, the effort required to maintain both loyalty and love, and it deepened my resolve. I realized that our bond had to be the anchor in this sea of tension, the foundation upon which we could navigate the evening. There were moments when Margaret's scrutiny intensified, small tests that revealed her underlying skepticism. She would ask a pointed question about my career, my family background, or my intentions, phrased innocuously but loaded with implications. Each inquiry felt like a challenge, a subtle probe designed to expose weakness or inconsistency. I learned to answer carefully, with honesty tempered by tact, ensuring that every word reflected my integrity while remaining respectful of the social boundaries she enforced. The delicate balance between assertiveness and humility became the central focus of my interactions. Despite the tension, there were fleeting moments of connection and insight. Sophia shared small anecdotes about her childhood, the memories of family traditions, and the joys she had experienced growing up under her mother's strict guidance. These glimpses of intimacy offered both comfort and a reminder of the human complexity beneath Margaret's formidable exterior. I realized that understanding her perspective, even partially, was crucial to navigating the evening. Her protectiveness, though harsh, was rooted in love and fear, a combination that had shaped her approach to family, loyalty, and trust. As the night unfolded, I noticed subtle shifts in Margaret's behavior, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying close attention. There were moments when her sharp gaze softened, a flicker of surprise or contemplation crossing her features as she observed my interactions with other guests. I took note of these small cracks in her armor, recognizing that patience and persistence might yield progress if handled correctly. Every word I spoke, every gesture I made, was part of a delicate negotiation, a silent dialogue between intent, perception, and expectation. Sophia's role became increasingly crucial, as she guided me through the social currents, offering gentle cues, subtle introductions, and quiet reassurances. Her love for me was evident, unwavering, yet tempered by the fear of confrontation with her mother. She had grown up learning to navigate Margaret's exacting standards, and now I relied on her expertise to interpret the unspoken rules and expectations. Together, we formed a silent partnership, united against the invisible pressure that sought to separate us. During a brief pause in the evening, we retreated to a quieter hallway, away from the prying eyes of guests and the commanding presence of Margaret. Sophia's shoulders slumped slightly, the tension momentarily released, and she whispered, "I hate seeing you like this. I hate that it's so hard." Her vulnerability struck me deeply. I took her hand, holding it firmly yet gently, a silent promise that we would endure this together. Her tears, barely held back, reflected both her love and her fear, the dual forces that had shaped the evening's drama. It became clear that the evening was as much about testing Sophia as it was about testing me. Margaret's expectations, though framed as judgment of me, exerted pressure on her daughter, forcing Sophia to navigate a maze of loyalty, fear, and love. Each glance, each word, each carefully managed smile was part of a larger performance, one designed to maintain family cohesion while testing the resilience of relationships. Observing this, I understood that acceptance would not come easily. It would require persistence, integrity, and a willingness to withstand scrutiny without yielding to bitterness or anger. As the night wore on, I began to internalize a new perspective. Margaret's hostility, though harsh and unjust, was not insurmountable. It was rooted in fear, experience, and a desire to protect her family from perceived threats. Understanding this allowed me to reframe the situation, transforming feelings of humiliation and isolation into a strategic awareness. Every interaction became an opportunity to demonstrate patience, empathy, and steadfastness, qualities that could not be undermined by rumor, prejudice, or expectation. The first act of the evening had established the stakes, clarified the challenges, and revealed the intricate dynamics of family, loyalty, and judgment. Sophia and I were united in our purpose, yet acutely aware of the hurdles before us. Margaret's scrutiny remained unyielding, but the foundation of our strategy, patience, observation, and quiet resilience was firmly in place. The villa, for all its beauty and elegance, had transformed into a crucible, testing not just our relationship, but our capacity to endure, understand, and ultimately prevail. Determined not to be sidelined any longer, I decided to take a proactive approach. The tension that had coiled around me since the moment we entered the villa needed to be met, not with confrontation, but with measured action. Every step I took, every smile I offered, every word I spoke had to be deliberate, aimed at softening Margaret's rigid perception while maintaining my own dignity. I began engaging with the guests, introducing myself where appropriate, and expressing genuine curiosity about their experiences and connections to Sophia's family. It was an exercise in restraint, patience, and observation. Each interaction, a careful dance designed to reveal character without arrogance or defensiveness. Margaret, as expected, did not relinquish control easily. She hovered at the periphery of these interactions, her gaze sharp and assessing, her body language commanding. It was as if every gesture I made was under silent evaluation, each laugh or nod dissected for sincerity or impropriety. Guests, whether consciously or unconsciously, mirrored her attitude, some warming to me cautiously, others maintaining a polite distance. The villa's grand hall, with its gilded fixtures and crystal chandeliers, had become a stage upon which my conduct would be judged, my every move analyzed for compatibility with her ideal of who belonged. I noticed the subtle ways Margaret tested me. She would comment casually on my career, my background, or my personal life, phrased in tones of casual curiosity, but layered with expectation and judgment. Each inquiry required careful navigation, an answer that conveyed honesty, competence, and humility all at once. I quickly realized that charm alone would not suffice. I had to demonstrate depth, reliability, and an understanding of the family's values without appearing desperate or defensive. It was a high-stakes negotiation, unspoken yet palpable, each moment fraught with potential peril or progress. Sophia remained my anchor throughout this delicate maneuvering. She guided me quietly, indicating when a smile or a remark was appropriate, subtly redirecting conversations to shield me from unnecessary scrutiny. Her devotion was evident in her attentiveness, yet I could see the strain her efforts imposed, the delicate balancing act between advocating for me and appeasing her mother weighed heavily on her, and I felt a surge of protective resolve. I knew that the strength of our relationship would be tested not just by Margaret's scrutiny, but by the emotional toll it exacted on Sophia herself. At one point, a small incident offered both a challenge and an opportunity. A guest, noticing my hesitation in responding to a pointed comment about my family, made a lightly veiled remark about outsiders failing to understand the intricacies of established family dynamics. Margaret's eyes gleamed with subtle approval. I felt the sting of exclusion, but instead of reacting defensively, I chose to respond with a measured anecdote from my own life, a story of perseverance, loyalty, and the respect I held for family bonds. The tale was brief, yet sincere, framed in a way that highlighted common values rather than differences. To my relief, the guest nodded thoughtfully, and a flicker of recognition passed over Margaret's expression, imperceptible to anyone else, but a small victory nonetheless. This moment reinforced a critical realization. Confrontation would not win Margaret's approval, but demonstration of character might. Each action, each engagement, became a statement of integrity, an unspoken argument for my place within the family circle. I spoke with warmth and attentiveness, offering genuine compliments and showing interest in the guests' experiences. Slowly, the atmosphere around me began to shift in subtle ways. Polite smiles grew warmer, conversations included me more naturally, and a few previously skeptical glances softened. It was a gradual, almost imperceptible change, but it marked the first sign of progress in a night dominated by challenge. Sophia, sensing the shift, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. Though her vigilance never wavered, she whispered encouragements at intervals, brief touches of reassurance that grounded me amidst the uncertainty. Her presence reminded me that our united front, our shared understanding, and our mutual commitment were as vital as any gesture I made toward gaining external approval. In her eyes, I saw both the stakes of failure and the promise of triumph, and I drew strength from that duality. Margaret, ever vigilant, continued to test boundaries. She orchestrated casual observations, introduced subtle hypothetical scenarios, and watched carefully how I responded. Each interaction was a microcosm of the broader judgment I faced, an evaluation not merely of my behavior, but of my potential to uphold the family's standards and values. I had to remain composed, ensuring that neither pride nor frustration dictated my responses. Instead, I relied on empathy, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity, allowing my actions to speak louder than words. As the evening progressed, I began to see patterns in Margaret's approach. Her protectiveness stemmed not from malice but from fear, fear of disappointment, fear of betrayal, and fear of history repeating itself. Understanding this allowed me to temper my reactions, to engage with patience and strategy rather than emotional impulse. Each guest interaction became an opportunity to subtly challenge assumptions, to display qualities that aligned with the values she cherished, and to demonstrate that my intentions were sincere and steadfast. There were moments of tension, of course. A careless remark from a guest, a subtle snub, or an intentional glance from Margaret reminded me that the night was far from won. Yet, with each obstacle, I refined my approach, learning to navigate the unspoken rules of this social labyrinth with greater skill and resilience. Sophia remained by my side, her steady support, a quiet reassurance that we were navigating these challenges together. By the time dessert was served, I felt a cautious optimism. Though Margaret's approval was not yet fully earned, the first cracks in the barrier of her scrutiny had appeared. I had demonstrated patience, intelligence, and integrity in the face of subtle hostility, and the response, however minimal, suggested that these efforts were not in vain. The villa, with its elegance and weight of expectation, had become a proving ground, and I had begun to assert my presence, quietly yet decisively. The night was far from over, and Margaret's ultimate judgment remained elusive, yet I understood that acceptance would not be granted through confrontation or complaint, but through the sustained demonstration of character, empathy, and respect. Each interaction, each careful word, and each mindful gesture became a building block toward that goal, a slow yet deliberate path to overcoming the complex web of expectation and judgment that had dominated the evening from the start. The night carried on, and yet a subtle tension lingered between Sophia and me, one that had nothing to do with Margaret's scrutiny and everything to do with secrets that had been carefully tucked away in the corners of her past. While we navigated the social minefield of the villa, I caught glimpses of anxiety behind Sophia's composed exterior. It was in the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her clutch, the way her eyes darted toward her mother whenever Margaret's voice cut through the laughter of the room. Something was troubling her deeply, a truth she had not yet shared, and instinctively, I knew it would affect not only the evening, but the foundation of our relationship if left unspoken. Later, when a moment of relative privacy presented itself near the library alcove, I gently turned to her. "Sophia," I began cautiously, "there's something you're not telling me. I can feel it." She hesitated, swallowing hard, her gaze dropping to the floor, her hands twisted together nervously, as though trying to anchor herself. "It's nothing," she whispered, but I could hear the tension in her voice, the almost imperceptible tremor that betrayed the weight of her secret. I reached out, gently lifting her chin, so our eyes met. Her dark brown eyes glimmered with both fear and shame, and I knew the moment had come. She would either confide in me, or the truth would fester and create cracks too deep to mend. Finally, with a shaky breath, Sophia began to speak. "There's something about my past, something about my mother and me, that I never told you," she admitted. Her words fell softly but carried immense gravity. She explained that Margaret had imposed strict boundaries on her relationships growing up. Guided by fears and experiences Sophia had only partially understood. When she first met me, Margaret had already begun to assess my character, my intentions, and my suitability in ways Sophia herself had not fully realized until now. The revelation stung, not because it was unexpected, but because it explained so much: the subtle warnings, the anxious glances, the undercurrent of pressure that had shadowed our love from the beginning. I listened carefully, absorbing each word while keeping my own emotions in check. Sophia's secret was not a betrayal, though for a moment I had felt the sting of doubt. It was a survival mechanism, a way of protecting herself and the fragile connection we shared. Knowing that revealing the full truth might jeopardize both our relationship and her standing with her mother, I reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly, silently assuring her that her honesty, though delayed, was met with understanding, not anger. The bond between us, already strong, felt tempered and fortified in the crucible of this confession. Meanwhile, the villa's atmosphere remained a labyrinth of subtle tensions and quiet power plays. Margaret, oblivious to our private exchange, continued her deliberate surveillance of the room, assessing guests with a keen eye and carefully guiding interactions to reinforce her authority. Her manner was composed, elegant, and unyielding, the very image of control. Yet even her meticulous orchestration could not obscure the truth. She had created an environment that forced Sophia and me to confront hidden fears, to navigate obstacles, and to demonstrate resilience in ways that neither of us had fully anticipated. Sophia and I returned to the main hall with a newfound resolve. Our shared understanding acted as a shield against the currents of judgment swirling around us. I engaged more confidently with guests, subtly asserting my presence without challenging Margaret directly. Each interaction became a carefully calculated step, a demonstration of patience, respect, and authenticity. The subtle shift in my demeanor did not go unnoticed. Margaret's gaze lingered longer than before, probing, assessing, perhaps even questioning her initial conclusions. Though her approval was far from secured, the first signs of softening emerged in tiny, almost imperceptible ways. It was during this period of cautious navigation that I encountered another unexpected revelation. A distant cousin of Margaret's, previously unknown to me, approached with an air of polite curiosity. In hushed tones, she revealed glimpses of Margaret's past, a history of heartbreak, betrayal, and caution that had shaped her worldview. Each anecdote illuminated the origins of the rigidity and suspicion I had felt throughout the evening. I realized that Margaret's hostility was not arbitrary, but a defense mechanism honed over decades. Understanding this gave me not only insight, but also a strategy. Patience, empathy, and quiet consistency could begin to erode the walls she had so meticulously constructed. As the evening progressed, I observed Sophia's subtle efforts to mediate between us. Her guidance was gentle, almost imperceptible, a whispered cue, a small introduction, a slight adjustment of tone or body language designed to ease tension. Her love for me was evident in every action, yet I could see the strain it imposed. She carried the weight of dual loyalty, balancing the desire to support me with the deep-seated fear of incurring her mother's disapproval. It was a delicate dance, one that required courage, discretion, and unwavering devotion. I admired her resilience, recognizing that her strength complemented my own in facing the challenges of the night. Despite the complexities, there were moments of levity, shared glances, brief smiles, and quiet exchanges between Sophia and me provided a reprieve from the intensity of Margaret's scrutiny. These small interludes reminded me of what we were fighting for: the preservation of our love, the affirmation of our partnership, and the possibility of acceptance within a family that had initially rejected me. Each smile, each word of encouragement, was a reinforcement of the bond that had carried us through previous trials and would continue to sustain us in the challenges ahead. However, the weight of the evening's revelations could not be ignored. Margaret's calculated assessments, the subtle tests embedded in casual questions, and the overarching aura of judgment created a pressure that threatened to overwhelm. Yet within that pressure lay clarity, understanding the roots of Margaret's hostility, the reasons behind Sophia's secrecy, and the mechanisms of family influence provided a roadmap. Acceptance, I realized, would not be immediate, but by demonstrating integrity, patience, and steadfastness, the barriers erected by fear and prejudice could gradually be dismantled. As we moved toward the later stages of the evening, I felt a quiet determination settle within me. Sophia and I were no longer merely participants in a social gathering. We were navigating a complex emotional landscape, one in which every action, word, and gesture mattered. The night demanded both vigilance and grace, understanding and strategy. And while Margaret's judgment still hung over us like a storm cloud, the first cracks in her armor had begun to appear. With careful persistence, empathy, and unwavering commitment to our values, we had the opportunity to transform an evening fraught with tension and secrecy into one that could lay the groundwork for understanding, reconciliation, and the affirmation of our bond. The tension reached its zenith when Margaret, as though sensing that patience alone would not suffice, decided to confront me directly. I had been circulating among the guests, engaging politely, demonstrating interest in their lives, and subtly affirming my dedication to Sophia and her family. Each interaction was carefully measured, but Margaret's calculated presence never wavered. She had been observing every gesture, every word, every nuance of my behavior. Now, with the air heavy and charged with expectation, She approached, her posture regal, her gaze unyielding. "Ethan," she began, her voice calm yet imbued with authority, "I've been watching you closely tonight. Tell me, why should I trust you with my daughter?" The room seemed to pause. Even the soft music seemed to falter under the weight of her words. Guests subtly shifted their attention, sensing the gravity of the confrontation. It was not merely a question, it was a gauntlet, thrown with the precision of a master strategist. I could feel the collective anticipation, the silent waiting for my response, and I understood that my next words would carry immense weight, not just in Margaret's judgment, but in the broader perception of the family's inner circle. I took a deep breath, steadying the turbulence in my chest. The anger, the humiliation, the sting of exclusion, all had to be tempered with clarity and composure. "Margaret," I began, keeping my voice calm, measured, "I am here because I love Sophia. My intentions have always been honest, and my commitment to her and our future is unwavering. I am not perfect, but I am willing to work, to understand, and to respect the bonds that are important to your family." Each word was deliberate, designed to convey sincerity without defensiveness, to demonstrate strength without arrogance. Margaret's gaze did not waver. She studied me closely, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if probing for any sign of deception or weakness. The silence stretched, a palpable tension that made my pulse hammer in my ears. I sensed Sophia's presence beside me, her hand lightly brushing mine in a gesture of reassurance, a reminder that we were united in this confrontation. Her subtle support gave me the courage to continue, to hold my ground while maintaining respect for the authority she wielded so effortlessly. "You speak well," Margaret said finally, her tone neutral but tinged with scrutiny. "But words are not enough. Actions define character, and trust is earned, not declared." Her statement was both a challenge and a revelation. She was not unreasonable. She sought proof, evidence that my dedication was real, that my love for Sophia was more than rhetoric. The confrontation had shifted from judgment to assessment, from humiliation to opportunity. It was now up to me to demonstrate the integrity and resilience that I hoped would earn her respect. Throughout the rest of the evening, I approached interactions with renewed purpose. Every conversation, every gesture was an opportunity to reinforce the sincerity of my character. I engaged attentively with guests, listened actively, and offered thoughtful responses, never allowing frustration or insecurity to color my demeanor. Margaret's scrutiny remained, a constant pressure, but I felt increasingly capable of navigating it, using patience and composure as tools to subtly influence perception. At one point, a minor incident provided the first tangible test of this approach. A guest, attempting humor, and made a pointed remark about outsiders failing to understand the family's dynamics. The comment, though light in tone, carried an edge that could easily have provoked defensiveness or irritation. Instead, I responded with a calm, measured anecdote about my own experiences, navigating familial expectations, highlighting empathy, respect, and understanding rather than opposition. The response was met with nods and murmurs of approval, and I caught a flicker of acknowledgement from Margaret herself, a subtle but significant recognition that my words carried weight and truth. Sophia observed quietly, her expression a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. Her trust in me had never wavered, but the tension of the evening had placed an extraordinary burden on her. Seeing her reaction, I understood that my actions were not solely about earning Margaret's acceptance. They were about safeguarding our shared bond and validating the trust that Sophia had placed in me from the start. The stakes extended beyond social approval. They touched the very foundation of our relationship. Margaret, true to her meticulous nature, continued her subtle tests throughout the remainder of the evening. Casual comments, pointed questions, and keen observations were delivered with the precision of someone who had spent decades mastering social dynamics. Yet, With each interaction, I felt more adept at navigating the currents of her scrutiny, the initial shock, the sting of public judgment, and the sense of isolation had evolved into a focused determination. I understood the parameters of the challenge and was increasingly able to assert my presence with dignity, intelligence, and empathy. By the time the evening began to draw toward its later hours, a subtle shift had taken place. While Margaret's complete approval was far from secured, her demeanor had softened in imperceptible ways. The previously sharp edges of her scrutiny now carried hints of curiosity and consideration, suggesting that the consistent display of patience, integrity, and attentiveness was making an impact. Sophia's quiet relief mirrored my own cautious optimism. We had navigated the most intense confrontation of the night with composure, and the path to gradual acceptance, though still fraught, was becoming visible. The confrontation with Margaret had clarified much. Acceptance would not be immediate, nor would it be granted through argument or entitlement. Instead, it would emerge from sustained demonstration of character, thoughtful engagement, and unwavering respect for the values and fears that had shaped her worldview. The challenge was formidable, but it had also revealed the opportunity for growth, understanding, and the gradual dismantling of barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. As the final guests began to depart and the soft glow of the villa's chandeliers reflected off polished floors, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The night had tested every facet of my patience, courage, and emotional intelligence. Margaret's direct confrontation, once a source of dread, had become a catalyst for demonstrating resilience and sincerity. Sophia's trust, unwavering throughout the ordeal, had served as both anchor and motivation. And though the journey toward full acceptance remained ongoing, the evening had proven that even the most formidable opposition could be approached with strategy, empathy, and unwavering dedication. Sophia's intervention became the lifeline I had needed, delicate yet vital, guiding us through the turbulent social currents of her family's grand villa. As Margaret's gaze continued to sweep the room with calculated precision, Sophia positioned herself subtly between us, a bridge that balanced love and loyalty, fear and courage. Each time Margaret posed a probing question or offered a pointed observation, Sophia leaned slightly toward me, whispering a clarification, a hint, or even a distraction to deflect the tension. Her presence was a quiet yet powerful reminder that I was not navigating this battlefield alone. The subtlety of her support was extraordinary. She did not challenge her mother openly, for that would have been a direct affront and might have intensified Margaret's scrutiny. Instead, she employed micro-gestures, gentle touches, quick glances, carefully timed laughter to signal alignment with me while maintaining her position within the family hierarchy. I could feel the intricate web of family politics being managed expertly by her, and yet I was aware of the enormous toll it took on her. Each step, each gesture, required immense self-control and emotional resilience. I admired her strength, recognizing that her love was expressed not only through words but through these silent acts of advocacy. We found a quiet corner of the villa, near a set of French doors that opened onto a moonlit terrace. Sophia's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of apology and determination. "I've been trying to protect us both," she whispered, "but I can't fix everything alone." Her vulnerability struck me, and I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. She had been navigating this delicate balance far longer than I had realized, carrying both the fear of her mother's wrath and the hope of preserving our love. I reached for her hand, grounding us both, a silent pact that we would face this together, no matter the obstacles. Margaret, ever vigilant, did not miss the small reunion of solidarity between us. She approached deliberately, the graceful precision of her movements exuding authority. Every guest instinctively straightened, as though Margaret's presence demanded perfection and adherence to her standards. I could feel her assessment as if it were a tangible force, probing, evaluating, and silently dictating the rules of engagement. She did not speak immediately, allowing the tension to linger, her eyes conveying judgment without uttering a single word. The silence was almost unbearable. A measured psychological test designed to unsettle and provoke. Sophia's strategy became increasingly apparent. When Margaret inquired indirectly about my past experiences, she subtly redirected the conversation, framing my answers in ways that highlighted responsibility, integrity, and loyalty. Her interventions were small, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet they created openings for me to demonstrate qualities that Margaret valued. Slowly chipping away at her preconceived notions, each carefully navigated interaction built upon the last, creating a tapestry of credibility and trust that could not be dismissed lightly. The social choreography was intricate. Margaret continued to test my patience and composure, posing questions about loyalty, long-term intentions, and compatibility with family traditions. Her tone remained courteous, almost neutral, yet every word carried the weight of scrutiny. Guests observed, some innocently curious, others calculatingly attentive, contributing to a high-stakes psychological arena where each interaction mattered. I realized that this evening was not merely about earning acceptance. It was about proving my character in a context where every gesture was observed, analyzed, and interpreted. Despite the intensity, moments of intimacy and reassurance emerged. Sophia and I shared brief exchanges, soft smiles, fleeting touches, whispered encouragements that reminded us of the bond we were defending. These micro-moments provided emotional sustenance, reinforcing our shared commitment and offering a reprieve from the relentless scrutiny. Each gesture, though small, carried profound significance, affirming that our relationship remained intact even amid the pressure of external judgment. The culmination of Sophia's subtle interventions came during a critical moment. Margaret, evaluating a complex anecdote I had shared about my past experiences and family values, appeared momentarily conflicted. Her eyes flickered with something unidentifiable, a combination of surprise, contemplation, and reluctant acknowledgement. I sensed that the consistency, integrity, and composure I had demonstrated were beginning to register, challenging the assumptions she had built over years of caution and suspicion. It was a delicate breakthrough, barely perceptible, yet significant, a crack in the armor of judgment that had dominated the evening. Sophia's quiet encouragement, her whispered reassurances, and her subtle facilitation of social interactions were instrumental in creating this opening. Her love for me was expressed not through confrontation or rebellion, but through these nuanced, courageous acts that allowed me to navigate the situation without escalating conflict. The complexity of her role advocate, mediator, partner was profound, and I recognized that our shared success in this moment was as much a testament to her resilience as it was to my patience and composure. By the time the evening neared its conclusion, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Margaret's scrutiny remained, but there were moments where her expressions softened, subtle acknowledgments of the qualities she had sought to test. Acceptance was not yet fully granted, but the first foundations of trust and recognition had been laid. Sophia's presence, her strategies, and her unwavering support had been pivotal in facilitating this progress, transforming a night of tension into a carefully navigated path toward understanding and eventual reconciliation. The villa, with its grandeur and elegance, had been transformed from a stage of intimidation into a proving ground for resilience, strategy, and relational insight. Each interaction, each measured response, and each subtle intervention contributed to a delicate narrative of integrity and perseverance. I understood that Margaret's judgment was rooted in deeply held fears and experiences, and that navigating her scrutiny required empathy, patience, and careful attention to nuance. The night had been an intense lesson in character, strategy, and the dynamics of family loyalty. As we prepared to leave the main hall, Sophia and I exchanged a glance that conveyed more than words could capture. We had weathered a storm together, navigated the intricate web of expectations and fears, and emerged with a cautious sense of progress. Margaret's approval, though incomplete, had begun to materialize in small, meaningful ways, offering hope that persistence, integrity, and the courage to act with empathy could ultimately bridge even the most formidable divides. The evening had tested us, reshaped our understanding, and reaffirmed the strength of our bond, setting the stage for the challenges and triumphs yet to come. The evening's high point arrived with a sudden, unexpected incident that sent a ripple of tension through the villa. A tray of champagne, carried hastily by a young server, slipped from trembling hands, sending crystal flutes crashing to the marble floor. The sound echoed sharply, silencing laughter and conversation, turning every head in the room toward the source of the commotion. Glass shattered. Droplets of golden liquid splashed across the polished floor, and the air thickened with alarm and surprise. Guests instinctively stepped back, some muttering under their breath, while Margaret's sharp eyes narrowed, instantly assessing the chaos and the response it demanded. Without hesitation, I moved toward the scene, my steps deliberate yet quick, ensuring I would reach the server before anyone could slip or injure themselves on the shards. Sophia followed close behind, her hand lightly brushing mine, her eyes wide with concern. I knelt carefully, gathering the larger pieces and guiding the young server away from the danger, simultaneously signaling to the other guests to step back. In that moment, every ounce of attention in the room focused on my actions. I could feel Margaret's piercing gaze fixed upon me, evaluating, scrutinizing, judging not only what I did but why I did it. The intensity of the moment was palpable. Time seemed to slow as I steadied the trembling server, offering calm words to ease her panic while managing the hazardous situation. The guests watched silently, some impressed, others skeptical, all aware of the delicate balance between decorum and disaster. My actions were not about recognition or approval. They were about presence, responsibility, and the instinct to protect those around me. Yet, I understood that in this environment, every act of courage or composure would be analyzed, interpreted, and weighed against Margaret's standards. Margaret's response was subtle but telling. Her posture shifted, ever so slightly, a flicker of acknowledgement passing through her otherwise controlled demeanor. The sharp edge of her judgment softened, though only momentarily, revealing the first glimmer of consideration for my intentions. It was not yet approval, not yet acceptance, but it was significant, a recognition that my character could manifest through deeds, not just words. The tension that had gripped the room began to ease, replaced by a tentative sense of admiration from several guests who had observed my actions. Sophia exhaled quietly, a mixture of relief and pride evident in her expression. She whispered softly, "You handled that perfectly." Her words carried more than gratitude. They were a validation of our united effort to navigate the evening's challenges. The shared experience, though brief and intense, strengthened our bond, reinforcing the trust and understanding that had been tested throughout the night. I realized that this incident, while chaotic, had created an opportunity to demonstrate qualities that words alone could not convey: courage, composure, and genuine concern for others. The aftermath of the incident allowed for a shift in the social dynamics of the room. Guests, previously tense and guarded, began to relax, offering subtle nods and polite remarks. Some approached to thank me or comment on the swift handling of the situation. Margaret remained composed, her expression unreadable, but I noticed a subtle change, a brief lift of her brow, a measured exhale, the faintest acknowledgement of my competence and reliability. The unspoken message was clear. Actions had begun to speak louder than preconceived notions or whispered judgments. Even as the situation calmed, the pressure of the evening persisted. Margaret continued to observe, her eyes assessing not only the outcome of the incident, but the underlying qualities it revealed: patience, decisiveness, and the ability to maintain composure under stress were all being weighed carefully. I recognized that this event had shifted the narrative subtly, yet significantly. It was no longer only about my presence in the villa, but about proving my suitability, my alignment with values that Margaret held dear, and my capacity to navigate the complexities of family life with integrity. Sophia remained a steadfast ally throughout the incident. Her gentle guidance, whispered cues, and quiet encouragement had provided both emotional support and strategic insight. She understood the intricate dynamics at play, the subtleties of her mother's expectations, and the delicate balance required to mediate between us. Her presence not only eased the immediate tension, but also reinforced the deeper connection between us, illustrating the strength of our partnership and the resilience of our love in the face of adversity. After the initial chaos subsided, we returned to our positions within the room. Now approached with a new awareness, Margaret's scrutiny, though still present, had shifted slightly less rigid, less dismissive, tinged with a measure of curiosity and reflection. The incident had provided a tangible demonstration of qualities she valued: courage, responsibility, and attentiveness. It was a subtle but critical step toward earning her recognition, highlighting the interplay between action and perception in the delicate architecture of family approval. I realized that this moment represented more than a simple act of crisis management. It was a turning point in the evening's social narrative. The challenge of acceptance, which had seemed abstract and insurmountable earlier, was now grounded in observable behavior, measurable by the consequences of action, rather than the limitations of rumor or bias. Each subsequent interaction would build upon this foundation, allowing patience, integrity, and empathy to create meaningful shifts in perception. Sophia and I shared a quiet glance across the room, an unspoken acknowledgement of the progress we had made. The villa, for all its grandeur and complexity, had become less a stage of intimidation and more a proving ground for character and resilience. Margaret's eyes remained on me, but the tension had evolved from outright hostility to cautious consideration. The incident with the champagne had revealed the potential for acceptance to emerge from demonstration rather than argument, from consistent, principled behavior rather than verbal assurances alone. As the evening drew on, I understood that the journey toward Margaret's trust and recognition was ongoing. Yet, the critical lesson was clear. Moments of crisis, when handled with composure, empathy, and decisive action, could reshape perception in ways that polite conversation could not. Sophia's support had been indispensable, her subtle interventions creating openings for meaningful engagement. Together, we had navigated the night's peak tension, demonstrating that love, integrity, and courage could withstand even the most exacting scrutiny. After the chaos of the champagne incident had settled, and the guests began to regain their composure, a quieter, more intimate tension took its place. I found myself drawn toward the terrace, where the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the manicured gardens, casting gentle shadows across the stone pathway. Sophia followed, her hand brushing against mine with the familiarity and reassurance that had become our lifeline throughout the evening. It was there, away from the watchful eyes of the gathering, that I felt compelled to share a part of my past, a piece of myself that had remained private until now, a revelation I knew could influence not only Margaret's perception, but the depth of understanding between Sophia and me. I took a deep breath, the night air cool against my skin. Carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. "Sophia," I began quietly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've never shared, because I feared it might change how you or your family see me." Her eyes searched mine, filled with both apprehension and unwavering trust. I recounted moments from my childhood, challenges I had faced, and the personal failures and triumphs that had shaped the man I had become. I spoke of resilience forged through hardship, of lessons learned from mistakes, and of the unwavering commitment to integrity that I carried into every relationship. As I spoke, I sensed the subtle shift in Sophia's demeanor. Her gaze softened, her hand squeezed mine more firmly, and I realized that sharing these truths was not only about transparency, but about laying the foundation for trust in the face of judgment. She listened intently, her expression a mixture of empathy, pride, and quiet concern. The weight of her mother's scrutiny, and the social dynamics of the evening made the act of vulnerability all the more powerful. I could see that by revealing my authentic self, I was not only connecting with Sophia on a deeper level, but also preparing for the eventual reconciliation with Margaret. Margaret, ever observant, had not left the terrace. From a distance, I could feel her gaze assessing every word, every gesture, every nuance of my interaction with Sophia. Her presence was formidable, yet I sensed a flicker of curiosity in her watchful eyes, a subtle acknowledgement that perhaps there was more to me than rumor or first impressions had suggested. The tension between her protective instincts and the evidence of my character created a complex interplay, one that I navigated with careful attention to both my actions and my words. Returning to the main hall, I could see that Margaret's subtle reconsideration was beginning to manifest in her interactions. She remained composed, her exterior unyielding, yet the sharpness of her critique had softened in fleeting, almost imperceptible ways. The contrast between the earlier hostility and this tentative openness was striking. I understood that my decision to share my history, to demonstrate vulnerability and integrity, had created a bridge, small but significant, toward mutual understanding. Each subsequent exchange would build upon this fragile foundation, incrementally shifting perception from suspicion to cautious acceptance. Sophia, sensing the delicate progress, guided me through the remaining social interactions with deft subtlety. Her quiet cues, gentle touches, and whispered reassurances provided the framework within which I could continue to navigate the evening's intricate dynamics. Together, we formed a strategic partnership, one that balanced empathy, patience, and deliberate action. Every interaction became a demonstration of respect, every conversation an opportunity to reveal character, and every gesture a reinforcement of the values we hoped Margaret would recognize and ultimately endorse. During a particularly revealing moment, a longtime family friend engaged me in conversation, probing my approach to relationships, values, and long-term commitments. I responded candidly, drawing upon the experiences I had shared with Sophia, illustrating both personal growth and steadfast principles. The friend listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully, and I caught a subtle glance from Margaret that conveyed a shift in perspective, her eyes registering not only my words, but the sincerity, consistency, and authenticity with which they were delivered. It was a delicate breakthrough, signaling that the foundation of trust was beginning to take root. Sophia's support remained a cornerstone of this process. She balanced discretion with advocacy, allowing me to demonstrate my integrity while subtly mitigating potential misinterpretations. Her dual role as partner and mediator exemplified both courage and strategic intelligence, highlighting the depth of her commitment to our relationship. Observing her in this role, I recognized the complexity of her challenge, maintaining fidelity to our shared bond while navigating the intricate expectations imposed by her mother and the family's social circle. As the evening unfolded further, I felt a growing sense of control and clarity. The initial chaos, the whispered judgments, and the pervasive tension had given way to an environment in which deliberate action and authentic character could influence perception. Margaret's scrutiny, though still present, had become less rigid, less immediate, tinged now with cautious curiosity and intermittent acknowledgement. The subtle shifts in her demeanor reflected the cumulative impact of consistent integrity, patience, and relational insight, qualities that could not be dismissed or undervalued. By the time the final course was served, I sensed a tentative equilibrium forming. Margaret's judgment remained complex, yet the pathway toward acceptance had been illuminated. I understood that words alone could not secure approval. It was through sustained demonstration of character, empathy, and dedication that progress would continue. Sophia and I had navigated the most delicate and revealing moments of the evening together, emerging with our bond strengthened, our understanding deepened, and our resilience tested and proven. In the quiet moments that followed, I reflected on the evening's lessons. The challenges we faced were not merely social, they were deeply human, rooted in fear, protection, and the complexities of family loyalty. By embracing vulnerability, demonstrating integrity, and maintaining composure under scrutiny, I had begun to bridge the gap between suspicion and trust. Sophia's guidance, support, and courage had been indispensable, reinforcing the principle that love, when combined with patience and strategy, could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. The villa, once a stage for judgment and tension, had transformed into a proving ground for character, resilience, and relational intelligence. Margaret's eventual acceptance, though not yet fully realized, had become attainable through the deliberate, consistent, and authentic engagement of the evening. And in that realization, I found both relief and renewed determination, aware that the night's challenges had not only tested our commitment, but also laid the foundation for enduring understanding and trust within the family. Margaret's subtle tests had continued throughout the evening, each one a deliberate probe of my character, patience, and compatibility with her family's values. Her observations were never overt, yet they carried an unmistakable weight. A slight arch of an eyebrow, a deliberate pause before a question, a quietly measured glance. Each gesture served as a reminder that acceptance would not be granted lightly. I had come to understand that these trials were not acts of malice, but rather a complex, carefully orchestrated challenge designed to protect her family from perceived threats. And tonight, I was determined to meet those challenges without faltering. The final test came unexpectedly during a casual conversation with Margaret in the drawing room. She presented a hypothetical scenario, framed innocuously, asking how I would handle a conflict involving the family. The room seemed to shrink around us, the ambient hum of conversation fading into the background, as all attention, though subtle, shifted toward our interaction. Every word I would speak, every tone I would take, had to be precise. One misstep could undo the progress painstakingly earned. Over the course of the evening, I felt a mixture of adrenaline and focus, a clarity born of necessity that allowed me to respond with both authenticity and strategic insight. "Ethan," she began, her voice calm, yet carrying the sharpness of scrutiny. "Imagine a situation where a family member feels betrayed by another. How would you handle it?" The question was deceptively simple, but its implications were profound. It was not just a test of conflict resolution, but a probe of empathy, judgment, and the ability to navigate complex relational dynamics. I drew a measured breath, choosing my response carefully. "I would listen first," I said, maintaining eye contact, ensuring my sincerity was evident. Understanding the perspectives of all involved is crucial. Then, I would seek to mediate respectfully, finding common ground while upholding principles of honesty and fairness. My goal would be reconciliation, not dominance, and ensuring that the relationship, whether familial or otherwise, remains intact without compromising values. My words were deliberate, structured not only to answer the question, but to convey the qualities Margaret seemed to value: patience, integrity, empathy, and steadfastness. Margaret's eyes remained locked on mine, unblinking, analyzing, weighing every nuance of expression, tone, and intention. The silence that followed was intense, stretching long enough for my pulse to thrum in my ears. I could sense the tension in the room, the subtle anticipation of guests who understood the high stakes of this seemingly casual exchange. Sophia stood nearby, her hand lightly brushing mine, her eyes reflecting both hope and anxiety. In that instant, I understood that this test, more than any prior one, would define the trajectory of my acceptance within her family. Margaret's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, signaling the first acknowledgement that my response had resonated in some measure. She nodded slowly, her gaze softening just enough to suggest that my approach aligned, at least partially, with her expectations. It was not full approval, not yet, but it was a crack in the rigid framework of her judgment, a recognition that my character could withstand scrutiny and that my intentions were sincere. The subtle shift, though minor, was significant. It marked the beginning of a transition from skepticism to cautious consideration. Sophia exhaled quietly, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of relief and pride. Her subtle guidance had allowed me to navigate this delicate interaction successfully, and her presence had been essential in maintaining composure and clarity. The partnership between us had been tested repeatedly throughout the evening, and now, in this critical moment, it had yielded tangible results. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for her unwavering support and the strength she lent me in moments where my own resolve might have wavered. Following this interaction, I continued to engage with the remaining guests, each conversation an opportunity to demonstrate integrity, respect, and consistency. The subtle acknowledgement from Margaret seemed to ripple through the room, influencing how others perceived me and reinforcing the growing credibility of my presence. Small gestures, a polite smile, attentive listening, and thoughtful responses were now met with less suspicion, a testament to the power of consistent behavior over time. The atmosphere, though still tense in certain corners, had shifted incrementally, creating openings for continued trust building. Later, Sophia and I found a moment to reflect privately, seated near a softly glowing lamp that cast warm light across the room. She leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "You handled that perfectly. I think she's starting to see you for who you really are." Her words were a balm, a recognition of the effort, composure, and authenticity I had maintained throughout the evening. I realized that the night had not only tested my ability to endure scrutiny, but had also highlighted the significance of empathy, strategy, and emotional intelligence in navigating complex social and familial dynamics. Margaret's final test, though subtle, had underscored a fundamental truth. Acceptance is rarely immediate and often requires the sustained demonstration of character, patience, and integrity. By approaching each interaction thoughtfully, responding to challenges with composure, and remaining true to my principles, I had begun to reshape perception, laying the groundwork for eventual recognition and trust. Sophia's role, balancing support with strategic guidance, had been indispensable, and her love had been both a shield and a catalyst, reinforcing the resilience required to navigate the evening successfully. As the last guests began to depart and the villa settled into a quieter rhythm, I reflected on the transformative nature of the night. Margaret's initial hostility, though formidable, had been navigated successfully through deliberate action, authenticity, and the subtle guidance of Sophia. The evening had evolved from a tense social encounter into a proving ground for character, resilience, and relational intelligence. Each challenge, each subtle test, had revealed the qualities necessary not only to endure scrutiny, but to foster understanding and trust within a complex familial context. Though full acceptance remained a goal for the future, the events of the evening had demonstrated that persistence, empathy, and integrity could gradually bridge even the most formidable divides. The villa, with its elegance and weight of expectation, had become a crucible for growth, testing not only my relationship with Margaret, but also the strength of the bond between Sophia and me. And in that crucible, we had emerged with clarity, resilience, and the knowledge that love, coupled with patience and principled action, could overcome even the most exacting scrutiny. The final stage of the evening unfolded with a delicate tension that hung in the air like a thick velvet curtain. Margaret, having observed every word, gesture, and interaction for hours, appeared to retreat slightly into contemplation. Her eyes, which had previously been sharp and unyielding, now flickered occasionally with subtle acknowledgement, a softened scrutiny, a faint curiosity, and an almost imperceptible reconsideration of the conclusions she had drawn earlier. Sophia, sensing this shift, moved with cautious optimism, guiding me through remaining interactions with the same combination of subtlety and care that had characterized her support throughout the night. We found ourselves in a quieter corner of the villa, near the music room, where the soft strains of a piano provided a gentle backdrop. The atmosphere was less charged, Though the weight of the evening still lingered, Margaret approached with deliberate grace, her posture composed but her eyes conveying the sharp intelligence that had dominated her earlier demeanor. I sensed that this was a pivotal moment, a final opportunity to demonstrate that my integrity, patience, and dedication had not only endured scrutiny, but had begun to earn recognition. "Ethan," she began, her tone measured, "I have observed you throughout the evening. Your actions and demeanor have been instructive." Her words, though lacking overt praise, carried the weight of acknowledgement. I met her gaze, maintaining a composed expression, and nodded in recognition of the implicit significance. This was the first overt sign that the barrier of skepticism, which had defined much of the evening, was beginning to erode, replaced by a tentative acceptance that had been long overdue. Sophia, standing close, offered a subtle smile, her fingers brushing lightly against mine in a gesture of reassurance and solidarity. Her presence, unwavering throughout the evening, had been instrumental in navigating the delicate social and familial dynamics that had defined the night. I felt a deep gratitude for her support, recognizing that the strength of our partnership had not only facilitated my gradual acceptance, but had also reinforced the resilience and depth of our love. Margaret continued, her tone softening. "I still have expectations and standards, but it is clear that you approach challenges with a level of thoughtfulness and sincerity that I cannot ignore." The words were carefully chosen, a balance between recognition and the preservation of her authoritative stance. I understood that this was a significant milestone, the acknowledgement that my actions, patience, and consistent demonstration of integrity had begun to reshape her perception. The subtle shift in tone signaled a turning point, a move from rigid scrutiny to cautious openness. The culmination of the evening's interactions highlighted the power of consistent, principled action in earning trust and recognition. Each conversation, each small act of attentiveness, and each demonstration of patience had contributed to this moment. Margaret's softened demeanor, though still measured, indicated that the foundation for deeper understanding had been established. The complex interplay of observation, subtle testing, and careful navigation had produced results, a tentative acceptance that could be built upon in the days to come. Sophia's eyes met mine, reflecting relief, pride, and an almost imperceptible joy. Her subtle interventions throughout the evening had been pivotal, providing both guidance and emotional support. Together, we had navigated the labyrinth of expectations, scrutiny, and familial dynamics, emerging with a strengthened bond and a clearer path toward acceptance. The shared experience had reinforced our connection, demonstrating that resilience, empathy, and strategic patience could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. Margaret's final acknowledgement, though restrained, carried a profound weight. It was a recognition not only of my presence, but also of the integrity and sincerity I had demonstrated throughout the evening. The subtle softening of her gaze and measured tone suggested that the foundation for reconciliation and mutual understanding had been laid. It was not complete approval, but it was progress, the first tangible step toward bridging a divide that had seemed insurmountable earlier in the night. The villa, with its grandeur, opulent decor, and ambient lighting, had transformed from a setting of judgment and tension into a crucible for growth, understanding, and the demonstration of character. The events of the evening had tested not only my patience and composure, but also the resilience and commitment of Sophia and me as a couple. Every challenge had been met with deliberate action, empathy, and integrity, reinforcing the principle that love, when coupled with strategy and emotional intelligence, could endure scrutiny and facilitate understanding. As the final guests departed, the villa settled into a quieter rhythm. The chandeliers cast warm reflections across the polished floors, and the soft music of the piano lingered in the background. Margaret's expression, though still composed and measured, revealed subtle signs of reflection and consideration. She had observed, evaluated, and, in her own careful way, begun to acknowledge the qualities she had scrutinized so intensely. It was a delicate but meaningful progression, signaling that the work of acceptance, though ongoing, had commenced. Sophia and I shared a quiet moment of connection, standing together as the evening drew to a close. Our hands intertwined. We exchanged a glance that conveyed both relief and quiet triumph. The challenges of the night had tested our relationship, our resilience, and our capacity for empathy and understanding. Yet, through patient navigation, consistent demonstration of character, and unwavering support for each other, we had begun to forge a path toward reconciliation and recognition. The night's culmination underscored a profound lesson. Acceptance, especially within complex family dynamics, is earned through sustained integrity, empathy, and thoughtful engagement. It is not granted solely through words or declarations, but through consistent, principled action that aligns with the values and expectations of those who hold influence. The journey toward trust and recognition is often gradual, requiring patience, resilience, and the courage to remain authentic even under scrutiny. As we prepared to leave the villa, I felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. The evening had been a crucible, testing every aspect of patience, composure, and relational intelligence. Margaret's acknowledgement, though tentative, marked a turning point, and Sophia's unwavering support had reinforced the strength of our partnership. Together, we had navigated a complex web of expectation, judgment, and scrutiny, emerging with a clearer understanding of ourselves, each other, and the challenges that lay ahead. The evening drew to a close, and with it came a quiet but profound sense of resolution. The villa, which had earlier seemed like an imposing arena of scrutiny and judgment, now felt slightly transformed, less a stage for evaluation, and more a testament to endurance, patience, and the subtle art of winning trust through consistent action. Margaret's presence remained formidable, but the sharpness that had characterized her scrutiny had softened, replaced by a measure of acknowledgement and, perhaps, reluctant respect. It was clear that the night had shifted not through confrontation, but through demonstration, the steady accumulation of actions that revealed integrity, composure, and genuine intent. Sophia and I walked slowly through the grand hall, side by side, our hands intertwined in a silent pact that spoke louder than any words could. Her eyes, previously wide with tension, now held a softness, a mixture of relief and quiet pride in how the night had unfolded. I could see that her trust in me had only deepened, tempered and solidified by the challenges we had faced together. The weight of the evening's trials had not diminished our connection. Instead, it had fortified it, creating a shared memory of resilience, strategy, and unwavering commitment. Margaret approached one final time, her expression composed but subtly altered. There was no overt praise, no declaration of full acceptance, but the subtleties of her demeanor, her measured nod, the faint relaxation in her shoulders, and the brief softening of her gaze spoke volumes. It was recognition that the barriers she had erected were being challenged not through argument or entitlement, but through patience, integrity, and deliberate demonstration of character. The acknowledgement, though restrained, was significant, a quiet opening for trust and understanding that had seemed impossible earlier in the evening. I reflected on the arc of the night, from the initial shock of Sophia's whispered warning to the chaos of the champagne incident. The subtle observations and the carefully navigated conversations with Margaret and the guests, each challenge had tested not only my patience, but my ability to maintain composure under intense scrutiny, to act with empathy, and to demonstrate the qualities that aligned with the family's values. The evening had become a crucible in which character, resilience, and relational intelligence were forged and revealed. Sophia remained by my side, her quiet presence both comforting and empowering. She had guided, encouraged, and subtly advocated for me throughout the evening, often at the cost of her own emotional comfort. Her ability to balance loyalty to her mother with her devotion to me had been remarkable. and I realized that our shared success in navigating the evening's complexities was as much a testament to her strength as it was to my perseverance. Together, we had weathered scrutiny, judgment, and subtle tests of character, emerging with a deeper understanding of each other and the dynamics of the family we sought to integrate into. The subtle shifts in Margaret's demeanor also revealed another truth. Even the most formidable guardians of family traditions, bound by fear and past experiences, could be reached through consistent demonstration of honesty, patience, and care. The evening had illuminated the interplay between fear, judgment, and recognition, illustrating how actions could speak louder than assumptions or biases. I felt a cautious optimism, understanding that while full acceptance would take time, the foundations had been laid, and the path forward was now clearer. Guests began to depart, their polite farewells punctuated by subtle nods and glances that suggested their perception of me had shifted. However modestly, each interaction, each demonstration of composure, empathy, and attentiveness had contributed to this subtle realignment. The villa, once a stage of intimidation and tension, had become a testament to the power of consistent, principled behavior in the face of scrutiny. It was a reminder that respect and trust are not demanded but earned through deliberate, authentic action and thoughtful navigation of complex social dynamics. Sophia and I lingered briefly near the exit, taking in the final moments of the evening. Her hand remained in mine, her presence a grounding force, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the strength she had provided. The challenges of the night had been formidable, yet together we had maintained integrity, patience, and empathy, allowing for subtle but meaningful progress in Margaret's perception. The experience had been exhausting, illuminating, and ultimately rewarding, revealing the intricate dance between love, loyalty, and the careful navigation of familial expectation. As we stepped out into the night, the villa's lights casting long reflections on the manicured grounds, I reflected on the lessons embedded in the evening's events. Acceptance, trust, and recognition cannot be forced or demanded. They must be nurtured through consistent integrity, patience, and empathy. By demonstrating character in action rather than merely words, one can gradually influence even the most skeptical observers. Sophia's unwavering support had been instrumental, highlighting the importance of partnership, mutual trust, and strategic guidance in overcoming obstacles. Margaret's subtle softening, the cautious acknowledgement of my efforts, and the tentative shifts in the guests' perceptions all reinforce the principle that meaningful change is incremental. It requires perseverance, the ability to remain authentic under pressure, and the courage to act with both empathy and conviction. The night had tested our relationship, our resilience, and our capacity for thoughtful engagement. Yet, it had also created opportunities for growth, understanding, and the gradual establishment of trust. By the time we left the villa behind, I understood that the challenges of the evening had laid a foundation for future reconciliation and deeper familial connection. Margaret's initial hostility, while formidable, had begun to yield to the consistent demonstration of character, the patient navigation of complex social dynamics, and the subtle yet powerful influence of Sophia's support. The experience had been a crucible, testing and refining our relationship, illuminating the path toward acceptance, and underscoring the enduring power of love, integrity, and resilience in the face of scrutiny. The events of that night taught a profound lesson. Acceptance is rarely immediate, and trust must be earned through consistent, principled action. True resilience is revealed not in words, but in deeds, in the patience and integrity displayed when facing scrutiny and judgment. Family dynamics can be complex, shaped by fear, past experiences, and protective instincts, but empathy, honesty, and steady composure can bridge even the widest divides. Sophia's unwavering support illustrated the importance of partnership, mutual trust, and subtle guidance in navigating challenges together. In moments of tension and adversity, remaining authentic while demonstrating care, responsibility, and respect can transform skepticism into recognition, building the foundation for lasting understanding and connection. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional journeys and gripping family dramas.